Welcome back to the best damn training channel on YouTube. Today is the last day of week 3 for Summer of Speed. It's gonna be our last speed session before going into a deload week next week. So we're gonna try to run hard, jump hard, lift hard today as well. We're gonna start off with the seated quad broad jump. So from a seated position, toes on the line, 4 consecutive broad jumps, trying to get out as far as we can. If I remember correctly, last week I did this to about 13.8, which puts me about right here. I think that was my farthest jump. This marker right here is the 13-meter marker. This cone right there is at 11 meters. But if you guys can see this yellow line here, we're trying to get our last jump over this yellow line somewhere into this 13 to 14 meter range here. So 4 total jumps. And then we're gonna set up for some fly float flies, and then we'll do some 30-meter sprints today. And one thing I wanna go over today, once we get into the sprints, is the setup for your sprint. Whether you're doing a 3-point stance, a 2-point stance, or even a 4-point stance without using blocks. So we're not gonna go over a block setup today because I'm not gonna be using blocks, but I'll talk to you about different ways you can set up for the 2-point stance, 3-point stance, and even a 4-point stance going from the ground. All right, so I got rep number 1 here. Sorry about the angle too. Normally I'd put this camera on the track and give you guys a little side profile, but they have a scrimmage going on. So I've got to kind of tuck the camera off to the side here. But we're gonna go for rep number 1. I'll say that's right on the 13. It's like 13.3, but I'll put that on the 13-meter marker right there. All right, rep number 2 coming up. First one felt a little flat, to be honest. First, like this initial jump from the seated position felt great, but then the transition for the jumps number 2, 3, 4 felt pretty stiff. So we're gonna try to smooth that up a little bit. Oh. All right, that was substantially better. 13.95. The difference between those two was I spent a little bit more time on the ground on each one of those jumps. I wasn't trying to just like pop through. I allowed myself to kind of land, roll over my foot, and get myself into a position to project myself a little further on that. So that allowed me to get some more carry on each of those jumps and almost hit 14 meters on that. So 2 more reps on this. Can we get 14 meters? If I get 14 meters on either of these next 2 jumps, and this is your first time being here, or maybe you've been lurking and you aren't really subscribed to the channel, if I hit 14 here or on the next jump, then you gotta subscribe. Help the channel grow. Don't just keep lurking, right? As Tim Riley likes to say, there's 2 types of people in this world. Ones that are subscribers and ones that are not subscribers. So let's challenge ourselves to get 14. Oh, there it was. 14.10, we'll call that. I gotta put it on this side because it's too close to the other cone. There we go. Subscribe. I'll tell you what, having a visual is a motivator to kind of push a little bit harder on each of those jumps. Obviously, first jump here, 13. I gave myself the visual of that yellow line there. So unsurprisingly, I kind of landed on that position. And then having that yellow cone there for jump number 2 as I'm setting up. Obviously, my first jump, like I said, I felt a little flat, so I changed some things up. But after about jump 2, I knew, okay, I'm definitely getting past that cone. So it's like extra motivation where you put a lot more effort into the last 2 jumps, and then obviously got to about 13.95 and then 14.10. So those visuals are great to have there. So if you're doing jumps and you have some way to mark out where you're going, so you have a visual cue that you're trying to beat, whether it's a cone, a shoe, it could be a water bottle, whatever it is, grab something, set it on the ground, try to beat it every single time. A little bit of self-competition there. Oh, that one was bad. Those last 2 jumps were terrible. I'd say that's another 13.95. 2 jumps, 13.95. 1 jump, 14.10. Not bad overall. So I'm gonna lace up the spikes. We're gonna get ready for some sprints today. All right, so we're gonna start off with a 2-point stance, how to set up for that, and what you should be focusing on as you go from step 0 to, let's say, step 3. in your 2-point stance, what that means is you have 2 points of contact with the ground, which is going to be left foot, right foot. Now, wherever your start line is at in that 2-point stance, you generally want to crowd that line. So essentially get your foot as close to that line as possible to be able to shorten up the distance that you need to run. Now, if I'm doing a 2-point stance and I'm going to be running a 40-yard dash, I don't want to start back here and give myself a 40-yard plus 1 foot dash, right? I want to try to crowd that line and create as little of space as possible and make that as true to 40 yards as possible. So what I want to do is get my toe to that line, and then I'm thinking about putting my back foot in a position that I can still initiate a push from. So I don't want to be just straight leg back here, right? This position right here puts a lot of weight on that front foot, puts not too much weight on this back foot. It also doesn't give me enough room to kind of push and initiate that start from a 2-point stance. So feet-wise, generally what you want to do is you're going to go about a 1/2 foot behind your front. I got my front foot on the line. I'm going to put heel to toe, and then I'm going to go back a 1/2 foot and put that off to the side. That's going to be a generally strong position for you to create force in that 2-point stance. Now, getting down and getting started is where you need to kind of move your feet a little bit in order to find a spot that's comfortable for you. Now, just because I say you need to put your foot a 1/2 foot behind doesn't mean that's going to be right for everybody. So find a position that when you get into a crouch position here, you feel like you can still have enough force. Like you can see that knee angle right here. I can still push off of that back leg without having it to be too straight or having it be too close. So get about that 1/2 foot behind. And then what you're thinking about doing, lining your forehead up with the inside step of your front foot. That's generally going to put you a little bit more emphasis of weight on that front foot, but that's going to also put a little bit of weight on that back foot. And then from this position, raise your heel slightly up off of the ground. Arms are generally going to start in a running position. So rather than having like both arms flat down, because we run left foot, right hand up, you're generally going to start with whatever your lead foot is. That opposite hand is going to start up close to the head. The back hand is going to be back towards the hip, sort of similar to like a 3-point stance. And then from this position here, what I want you to think about doing is trying to create the push from that back leg. One, like think of it as like, it's got to be boom, boom, like boom, 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 boom. And what I mean by that boom, boom is like, I'm initiating that push from the back foot and then so I'm still pushing off of both feet, but I'm slightly emphasizing that back foot push because I need to get a little bit more assistance. What that's going to allow me to do is kind of rock forward slightly, drop that shin angle down to the ground, and then project myself towards whatever distance I'm going to be running. So you'll play around with that a little bit. You can go a 1/2 foot, you can go a full foot, you can go heel to toe, but generally what you want to see is that there's enough of a back knee bend. I don't know the specific degree of angle here where you can push off of still. So what you're really trying to avoid is getting too much of a straight back leg there. Front leg, as long as you get down into a crouch, try to get that heel up off the ground to allow your ankle to get stiff and push off of. That should put you in a position to create the most amount of force from that 0 step and project yourself in the correct manner. Now, when we talk about 3-point stance, now we have 3 points of contact on the ground. You're going to be going whatever your lead foot is, plus opposite arm, and then your back foot. From a 3-point stance, the general place to start is front foot is going to be 1 foot behind the line. Back foot is going to be somewhere either heel to toe or a 1/2 foot behind. And that could be depending on anthropometrics, which is like the length of your torso versus the length of your limbs. But generally, that's a place that you're going to be starting at. Hand on the ground is going to be whatever lead foot. So whatever foot is in front, that opposite arm is going to be down onto the ground. And the way that I like to set this up in a 3-point stance is I try to take my thumb and put it directly in the center of this thigh right here. And what that's going to allow me to do is create a balanced position where I feel like I've got weight on my front foot, I've still got some weight on my back foot, and then I've got a good amount of weight on that front hand. The majority of the weight in that 3-point stance should feel like it's on that hand. Then it should feel like it's on that lead foot, and then you should have a little bit onto that back foot. So it's not evenly distributed because we were leaning and we're trying to push ourselves in this direction. So setup wise, Again, we're gonna go 1 foot back. Just for the sake of setup, we'll go toe to heel, and we'll try to get those to be about hip width apart. Knees go down to the ground. I'm taking that thumb and I'm putting it in the middle of that quad onto that line. Now, the next thing we need to focus on is shoulder to hand. I want to keep that shoulder on top of the hand. I don't want to create a negative angle here, because what that's meaning, I'm leaning too far back and it's going to take me longer to push to get myself going in that direction there. So I want to keep that shoulder on top of the hand. When you raise yourself up from this position here, you want to think about raising just the hips up. And we're not looking at seeing any sort of change in angle with that shoulder to hand. So you shouldn't be raising yourself up where that shoulder comes back. Ideally, you want to keep that shoulder on top of the hand. If it does move at all, if it goes a little bit forward, that's okay. But try to just maintain a straight angle here, and you'll be in a very good position in order to push yourself off. So you'll get into your stance here, raise up that hand to the opposite hip again, and then from here, you've got your 3-point stance. Again, you can play with exactly where those feet need to be. So some people like to go 1 foot directly behind. You can go up to 1.5 feet. Some people like to go heel to toe. You can go 1/2 foot behind. The exact positions of where those feet are at are going to be based off of what's going to be most comfortable for you. But again, if we're looking at doing if we're looking at sprinting for time, we want to shorten up that distance as much as we can. So we don't want to be all the way back here in a 3-point stance where our first step is a foot past the line. And again, we're doing a 41-yard dash versus a 40-yard dash. So you crowd the line a little bit, put yourself in a position where you feel like you can explode out of that. And then the last thing as well, what I like to focus on with my 3-point stances is initiating that push from the back foot again. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's like a millisecond prior to pushing with the front leg. So it will look like I'm pushing off both legs at the same time, but there's a slight emphasis on starting that push with that back leg. So I'll get into the 3-point stance, and I'll actually show you guys the ground here, how much I emphasize pushing off this back leg. But what I'm here is I'm thinking about boom, boom, like it looks like it's going at the same time, but there is a slight emphasis on that back foot. Now, if we're looking at a 4-point stance and you want to go from the ground, the way that I like to do this is a way that I stole from Randy Harrington, who is a sprint track and field coach. And I really like the way that he sets up for a 4-point stance, especially if you don't have blocks. So what he likes to do is get his athletes into a quadruped position. So knees on the ground, hands on the ground. You're going to try to create 90-degree angles. The shoulder to the torso, it should be about 90. Knees should be at 90. Hips should be close to 90. Doesn't need to be exactly, obviously, but that's essentially where you're going to start from. Then what he likes to do is take whatever lead foot you're going to bring, is take that knee and line it up with that front forearm. So that position is going to be here for me. And then that back leg, if you were to put that knee down, you want to line up the back knee to the mid shin. And what that does is that puts you in a position that should align your joint angles up. So your front knee and your back knee optimally to project yourself in the fastest manner when we're looking at moving down the track. Now, this is a setup that you would use to practice for blocks, but it also works if you don't have blocks and you just want to do a setup with a 4-point stance doing some sort of a sprint. This is something you guys saw me do in the last sprint video, as I was doing a 4-point stance, and this is how I was setting up in that 4-point stance. Now, if you're not going to be doing a track meet or sprinting out of blocks, you could stick with the 2 and the 3. If doing a track meet or sprinting out of blocks is something that you're going to be doing, this would be step 1, is just getting your feet in the same position and doing a 4-point stance off of the ground to learn that position and learn how to project from a 4-point stance. The principles stay the same from a 3-point to a 4-point. So what I'm looking at doing, shoulders stay on top of the hands again, raise the hips, shoulders and hands should stay in the same position. So I'm not looking at coming back. If you go slightly forward, that's okay. But ideally, you want those shoulders to remain on top of the hands. And then again, it's a 2-foot push. Emphasize that back leg a little bit if you have problems with a 2-foot push. And from here, So those are some principles and some setup ideas. Play with it around a little bit, start with the 2, move to the 3, go to the 4 if you'd like. You don't have to do one over the other, especially if you're just training to sprint. Switching it up is fine. I generally will do a 3-point stance most of the time. I've been playing around with the 4-point stance this week, and I think I'm gonna do that as well today. But those are tips and tricks for how you can focus on your start and try to get a little bit better of a projection setup for your sprinting. But as for sprinting, today we are going to do our fly, float, fly from the acceleration standpoint. We're going to focus on that first 10. We're going to float through 10 to 20, and then we're going to go hard from 20 to 30. After we do probably about 3 of those, we're going to do 3 all-out 30s, and that will be the end of the track session. Then we're going to move into the weight room. We got some cleans, some squats, and some lower body accessory work to do today. So give me a moment here. I'm probably going to do a couple warm-up sprints just to kind of get my legs back, because it's been about 15 minutes since I did those broad jumps, and then we'll start knocking off some fly, float, flies. All right, did a couple warm-ups. I feel good. I feel loose. I feel like we'll have some competitive-ish times compared to what my best times have been. So in the fly, float, fly, what I'm looking at is, because I'm doing a hard 10, I want these 10s to be like 170, somewhere give or take on those. The float zone, probably gonna be like high teens, low 120s on that float zone, because I'm not looking at that being incredibly fast. What I'm really trying to do is create as much speed through that first 10 as I can, carry it without kind of decelerating, but not continuously trying to accelerate through 10 to 20, transition into a more upright position and try to hit a max velocity section here for that 10 or for that 20 to 30. So 3 reps on this. Rep number 1 coming up. So this isn't a true 30-meter sprint, because in this transition zone, the reason I have a float between 10 to 20 is because rather than continuously trying to accelerate and push and keep in a forward-leaning position almost, what I'm looking at doing is floating and transitioning to a more upright position so I can sprint more true to max velocity for this 20 to 30 meter range. So it's not just I'm doing a hard 30 meter and taking out 10 meters. What I'm trying to do is transition into max velocity. So create speed, transition, upright, punch it, and try to go hard for that last 10 meters. One, 6, 6, 0 to 10, 107, 20 to 30. 20.9 miles per hour. I tripped up on that 10, 403. So I went from a 66 to a 77. My second step was like a slight stumble on that. So, but was able to hit 106, which put me at 21.10 for that 20 to 30. So for the sake of what this is supposed to be, the fly, flow, fly, we're definitely hitting the max velocity numbers that I want to see here for 20 to 30. What I mean by I tripped up on that step was like your 0 step is essentially that initial push. So you're not really taking a step there. You're starting in a split position and you're pushing into your first step. But that first step that I did, so I'm in my stance, that first step that I did, I pushed out and that went way out to the side. So I was out like in this position here versus being a little bit more lined up. So then it pushed me off a little bit and it just felt a little kind of crooked on that first 10. So we'll clean that up here on the last fly, flow, fly. Try to project in a straight line, not kind of like a doot, doot. And then we should see that drop back down to like a 170. Yeah, so we cleaned that up a lot. 394, 169 on the first 10, 105 on the last 10. So our fastest fly right there, 21:30. Okay, so now we're gonna do 30 meters hard sprints. What we should see happen here is that 393, 394 should be dropping down, not because the 10's any faster, not because the 20 to 30's any faster, but specifically that 10 to 20 should be faster. So looking at my 3 reps, rep number 1, which was a 393, I had a 119, 10 to 20. Rep number 2, which was that 4-second one, is because of the slow 0 to 10, but I hit a 120, 10 to 20. And then on rep number 3, I hit a 120, 10 to 20. So that 120 number, 119, should be dropping down to mid-teens. So somewhere around 115, give or take. And if I can hit that 115, give or take, be able to maintain like a 107-ish on the first 10 and a 105, 106 on that back 10, that's where you're going to see that drop from like a 393, 394 to like a 388, 389, 390-ish on that. So we're working on developing now the acceleration through 30, not just doing kind of a fly, flow, fly. My back foot slipped on that a little bit, but was able to hit what I thought. So 387. Not too bad. 0 to 10, 165, 119 on that 10 to 20. So we're not actually getting any better on that. But then 103 put us at 21.72 miles an hour. I felt that 395 was because 0 to 10 went back to 176. So I have an issue with running in this lane right now because I've run so many reps here that the back foot has dug kind of a hole. So I'm kind of slipping a little bit on that initial push, but was able to hit 103 again. So I hit 21.72. The 10 to 20 dropped significantly down to 116. So I just need to clean up that 0 to 10 and be able to maintain that 116, 103, and then that'll be the perfect rep. All right, let me show you guys something real quick. This is the lane that I started, number 2, and you can see that back foot right there has just dug into the track to the point where it is pretty much down to the concrete almost where it's supposed to be. So like this is just all dug into, because this is where my back foot is at every single time as I run in lane number 2. And what I'm experiencing right now is some reps, I'm getting a good push and I'm able to kind of accelerate through 0 to 10 really well. And then those other reps where I feel like it's significantly slower is because there's some slipping going on as I start to push off of this back foot as well. What's happening is that divot is creating that inconsistency that I've been feeling in that 0 to 10. Like sometimes I've said like first 3 steps feel amazing, first 3 steps feel really bad, they're off. And I think it's because I'm not getting a consistent push off with both feet. Sometimes that back foot's slipping a little bit and I'm trying to make up for it in those first 3 steps. So what I'm gonna start doing is either running in lane 1 or lane 3 over the next training weeks and get away from that divot and see if I can't at least create more consistency within that first 0 to 10, because I shouldn't be seeing like a 166 and then a 177, but then seeing 10 to 20 get faster and 20 to 30 being the same top end speeds. What that's showing me is that inconsistency somewhere within that first 10 meters is probably because of that start. So we'll switch up the lanes and we'll do lane 1 or lane 3, like I said, next week and the weeks following that. But as for today, I was supposed to do a 3rd rep on the all out 30 and I'm feeling pretty good. And I feel like this first heavy, hard week for this training program has been a success. I've hit some really good numbers. I've hit some really good miles an hour in a short distance from 0 to 30. And with the volume being as high as it's ever been throughout this program so far, this being the first like high intensity, high volume week of the program, I feel like I'm not gonna gain much benefit of doing that 3rd rep because today is one of those days where it just feels very inconsistent, it feels off, and I'd rather just reset and go into the next week going through a deload and feeling good for week 5 when we go into a more power, strength focused type block, and then we'll start extending these distances on the track. So I'm gonna throw that last rep out and just call it good for today. But other than that, I appreciate y'all for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.